So this was a week of training that I was very, very happy with. This was the week that started last week, so it was the 18th through the 23rd. Ended up being really, really good. So I got a bunch of sessions done really, really quickly. So I got my whole squat work done on Monday in under an hour. My squat work done bench work done on Tuesday in under an hour. Heavy squat took a little bit longer just because it was quite heavy for me. Then this day took a long time because I just didn't want to be there. And then this day was actually fairly fast as well. So this actually ended up working out pretty well. So I was pretty happy with the way that everything went. So let's take a look at some of the things that I did this week and what we can do for next week. Or for this coming week. So this coming week, I'm actually entering into a deload, which means that everything will be a little bit lighter and a little bit lower volume. And we actually do deloads a little bit different. So I actually have a totally different plan for this week. I'm going from 5 days a week to 4, and my accessories are completely different. And we'll kind of go over that next week when I start going over what my deload looks like. But for now, I had 3 sets of squats at 451. I was quite happy with the execution of all of these. I ended up feeling that all of them moved fairly well. My stance has been fairly consistent, and I'm pretty happy with the fact that my technique looked and moved all like this across all sets and all reps. So this ended up being pretty something that I was pretty happy with and something I was pretty pleased by. The weight felt easier than it did last week. Again, one of the things that we're doing here with this is we're intentionally keeping the load the same on my lighter squat week, just as more of a technique day. So I'm working just on practicing the movement itself, and just trying to work on building up more competency in the movement of the squat and drive the heavier weights or drive some of the lighter weights faster. Again, this is not something I'm looking at doing as like a rate of force development thing. This is something I'm just looking to do to move the weight faster and just get a little bit more volume and more confidence in the movement of the squat. So I ended up being very happy with the way that all of these were executed, and I thought the rest of the day was good. Hit the rest of the back session, and that was a fun little back pump. Moved on to the next day of bench. I was finally able to start trusting my pec again, and it feels really, really good. So one of the things that I noticed when I was not trusting my pec very well is that I was very reticent to speed up the eccentric or speed through the eccentric of the bench. And on this day, I was able to get myself back to my normal eccentric speed, pause it for an easy single, and then press it. So this ended up being 341 for a fairly easy single. I feel like I had like 5-6 more RIR in there. So like it's something that I'm looking forward to pushing pretty hard. This week I will not be deloading my bench, but I'll be taking a very, very small jump up only to about 353. Because one of the things that we're going to look at working on this week is beating the previous down sets, right? So I ended up hitting 3 sets of 5 with an ascending load focus, going from 286 to 297 to 308. This week, what I'm going to be looking at doing is I'm going to be looking at beating this top set of 308. Very happy with my technique and my execution on my bench. I widened my finger out by about a half an inch. So I moved my pinkies from the rings to my ring fingers on the rings, and I like the way that it's moving a lot more now. But I'm very happy with the way that this looked. Main squat day. I had a bunch of singles to do. So I had to work from 451 up to 562. Had a nice little 50 kilo range. I thought this one was quite good. I didn't really focus on it that much, but it moved really easy, moved really fast, especially compared to the day 1 squat, which was good. This one, I felt like I took a little bit more seriously. This ended up being 496 here, which moved better. I took it more seriously, and I focused on it a little bit more. Then 507 for this rep. One of the nice things for me right now is that I'm just getting very comfortable under over 500 pounds on the bar with my squat. That is usually an area where I have a lot of mental barriers, and I get a lot of fear. And this is just because like I have injured myself with the squat multiple times, so I just get a little nervous around that movement. This one was good. This was 540. One of the things that I noticed, though, is that there was a little bit of deviance on the way down, right? So what I'm looking at here is when I say deviance on the way down, I'm not really concerned about this at the bottom. What I'm more looking at is I'm more looking at the way that my knees are tracking on the way down and the fact that my left knee is shaking considerably on the way down, right? So what I'm noticing here is compared to other squats and compared to other times when I've done better, my left foot was actually turned a little bit more straight in this rep than it has been before, which could have been pushing a little bit more pressure onto the knee. But it's also just one of those things where like it just didn't feel quite as stable as it normally did. I was happy with the depth on 540, but my knee felt terrible afterwards, so I was not really sure if I wanted to go up to 562, but then I did it anyway. So moved into 562, and I had the exact same thing. So if we watch my left knee here, what we'll see is on the way down, it's just shaking a whole bunch. Depth was questionable. Like probably for an RPS meet it'll pass, but not for like a normal meet, not for like a real one. But if we look at my knee, you can see right about here it's starting to shake, right? And one of the things that I'm looking at here is that my brain is realizing that my foot is not in the right spot where it normally is. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to push the knee into the position where it needs to be, but then also it's trying to let it compensate back into where it should be and where it is now, right? So looking at this is where I'm looking at the fact that my technique started to break down was at the very, very, very beginning of the movement, right before I even hit the hole, right? And even when I hit the hole, you can see that it kind of deviated in a little bit, but again, it deviated in within a very, very acceptable range, and it was more on my left than my right, but it was a very, very acceptable range of like adduction, because again, this is an internal rotation, just because it's everything is adducting at the same time. So this ended up being a fairly like a reasonable range, so it wasn't really that bad, but it was more on the descent that it happened. 3 board press, I worked up pretty well. The board and I were not really getting along. I felt pretty awful with it. And by pretty awful with it, I mean it just kept bouncing on my chest. I just couldn't feel like it was getting comfortable. But I did work up to a nice easy set of board presses at 396 for a moderately difficult set of 4. 3 board has always been something that I really struggle with because it's just not a movement that I'm very comfortable doing. But this one felt like it went pretty well, and I'm happy with it. And then my last day deadlifts, I had the goal of testing out a single, right? So I had the work to work up to a deadlift single, and we're getting up to work up to 705, which actually felt really, really good. So one of the things I noticed is that my right lateral quad was a little bit angry going into this, and my right hamstring is still something that I'm apparently protecting, because what you can see here is that I basically pulled with no hamstring, right? So this is going to be pretty much all quad off the floor, right? So it's all quad up to here. And then you can see that my brain just goes, okay, well, shit. Now I don't want to use my hamstrings to extend my hip. So from here, my body just goes glutes forward, and that's it, right? So what I'm looking at doing here is I'm looking at the fact that my knees extend early and then my hips extend second, right? So if we look at this in full motion or in full speed, right, you can kind of see that I kind of shift back a little bit first, use my quads to extend my knees, and then all that I'm doing from there is just driving glutes and hips forward. Right? So it's just one of those things where like it's very interesting to see what happens and how the body will compensate around an injury, and realize that like this is 700 pounds. So like I still pulled 705 with a tweaked hamstring, and like without using my hamstrings at all. So this is just a quad and glute based pull. So as the hamstrings, and now that I have some good success with the deadlift, I think the hamstring will feel pretty good for a big pull this week. This week I have 720 on deck, and I think it's going to be pretty fun. But again, this week I'm heading into a deload, so we'll take a look at what that looks like at the end of this week. Thank you guys for for watching this far, and if you guys are interested in hearing more of this, follow along on social media. My Instagram is @MattDomney, or just keep following me here.